The alien ships appeared at the edge of human space like ghosts from a nightmare. 12,000 vessels of different sizes and shapes drifted in the darkness, their hulls scarred and blackened from battles fought across the galaxy. Inside the largest ship, Ambassador Valthera pressed her thin fingers against the viewing window and stared at the small blue planet that hung in the distance like a jewel. Her people were dying. The Zephyrian Confederation, once proud rulers of 12 star systems, now existed only in these refugee ships. Behind them, their worlds burned with poison that had once been clean air. The bioweapon had spread from planet to planet like a disease, turning everything they had built into graveyards. Ambassador, her aide whispered, his violet skin pale with fear. The humans are responding to our message. Valthera closed her eyes. The humans were their last hope. Every other species in the galaxy had turned them away. The mighty Empire had closed their borders. The Centauri Republic had refused to even answer their calls. The proud members of the Galactic Council, who had once looked down on humanity as primitive and violent, now pretended the Zephyrians did not exist. But humanity had answered. On the blue planet below, President Minho Park sat in the emergency meeting room deep inside the government building. The holographic display showed him the alien fleet, thousands of ships carrying millions of desperate souls. Around the table, his advisors argued in heated voices. "Sir, we barely have enough resources for our own colonies," said Economic Minister Janae Lim, her face tight with worry. "How can we feed millions of refugees?" Defense Secretary Taeyeon Kim leaned forward. "This could be a trap. We know nothing about these aliens except that something destroyed their entire civilization. What if that something follows them here?" Dr. Haijin Lee, the head of Earth's Xenobiology Department, shook her head. "I've studied their transmissions. The bioweapon they describe is real. It changes the chemical structure of oxygen itself. Their people are suffocating on their own worlds." President Park studied the images of the refugee ships. He could see the damage on their hulls, the emergency repairs made with whatever materials they could find. These were not warships. These were the last survivors of a dying race. "The Galactic Council called us warmongers," he said quietly. "They said humanity was too violent to join civilized society. They wanted nothing to do with us. And now they come begging," muttered Defense Secretary Kim. "No," Park said firmly. "Now they come dying. There's a difference." The room fell silent. Through the windows, they could see the lights of the capital city, where millions of humans lived their daily lives, unaware that the fate of an entire species hung in the balance. In the alien flagship, Valthara waited for humanity's answer. She remembered the stories her grandfather had told her about the humans. They were a young species, barely 500 years into space travel. Their technology was simple compared to the great powers of the galaxy. But there was something different about them. Where other species had learned to avoid conflict, humans seemed to embrace it. They fought each other. They fought their environment. They fought anyone who threatened what they cared about. The Galactic Council had rejected humanity's application for membership 3 times. Too aggressive, they had said. Too willing to use violence. The great powers of the galaxy had laughed at Earth's primitive weapons and crude ships. But now, as Valthara looked at her dying people, she wondered if those primitive weapons and crude ships might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The communication system crackled to life. President Park's face appeared on the screen, his expression serious but kind. "Ambassador Valthara," he said in carefully practiced galactic standard. "This is President Park of United Earth. We have reviewed your request for sanctuary." Valthara held her breath. Around her, the bridge crew fell silent. "The United Earth government grants emergency asylum to all Zephyrian refugees," Park continued. "We are preparing temporary settlements on our outer colonies. Medical teams are standing by to help your injured, and to whoever did this to your people. Double. Quotes his expression hardened. They will learn that humanity does not forget those who target. The innocent tears ran down Valthera's face. After months of rejection and closed doors, after watching world after world fall to the bioweapon, someone had finally said yes. "Thank you," she whispered into the communicator. "Thank you." As the first human ships approached to escort the refugees to safety, none of them knew that this moment would change the galaxy forever. The hegemony forces that had destroyed the Zephyrian worlds were already moving toward human space. They had marked humanity for death the moment Earth opened its doors to the refugees. The sleeping giant of human military power still slumbered, but it would not sleep much longer. The galaxy was about to learn why the Galactic Council had feared humanity's violent nature. Sometimes, violence was exactly what justice required. 3 weeks had passed since the Zephyrian refugees arrived on New Busan, one of humanity's frontier colonies. The settlement camps stretched across the green hills like a small city, filled with the soft purple glow of Zephyrian energy lamps. Children of both species played together in the dusty paths between the temporary shelters, their laughter mixing in the warm afternoon air. Intelligence Director So Young-han watched the peaceful scene from her office window, but her mind was far from calm. The classified reports on her desk painted a very different picture than the one outside. She grabbed the files and ran toward the government building, her heart pounding with fear. President Minho Park was reviewing supply reports when Director Han burst through the door without knocking. His security guards reached for their weapons, but he waved them back when he saw the panic in her eyes. "Sir, we have a serious problem," Han said, breathing heavily. She threw the decoded transmissions onto his desk. The bioweapon that destroyed the Zephyrian worlds wasn't ancient. It was deployed 6 months ago by something called the Hegemony. Park picked up the papers, his face growing pale as he read. The alien text had been translated into simple Korean, but the message was clear and terrifying. The Hegemony was not just another space empire. They were exterminators, moving from system to system and wiping out entire species they considered inferior. General Jong-soo Park entered the room, summoned by an emergency alert. Despite sharing the same last name, he was not related to the president. But they had worked together for years, fighting colonial rebels and space pirates. "What's the situation?" the general asked. Director Han pointed to a star map on the wall. Screen. 3 hegemony war fleets are moving toward human space. Each fleet has over 50 ships, including dreadnoughts, that are 3 times larger than our biggest warships. "Why are they coming here?" President Park asked, though he already feared the answer. "Because we helped the Zephyrians," Han replied. "In their intercepted communications, they call us contaminated for giving aid to what they consider an inferior species. They believe any race that helps their targets must also be eliminated." Dr. Hyjin Lee was called to the emergency meeting. She arrived carrying her research tablet, still wearing her laboratory coat stained with alien blood samples. For weeks, she had been working with Zephyrian scientists to understand the bioweapon that had destroyed their worlds. "Doctor, how bad is this weapon?" President Park asked. Lee's face was grim. "It's worse than we first thought. The bioweapon doesn't just poison the air. It changes oxygen at the molecular level, turning it into something that burns the lungs from the inside. Death comes slowly and painfully. Entire populations suffocate while breathing normally." General Park studied the tactical reports. "Our intelligence suggests the Hegemony has used this weapon on at least 15 different species. They arrive, deploy the bioweapon, and wait for everyone to die. Then they move in and take the planets for themselves." "How long do we have?" President Park asked. "The first fleet will reach our outer colonies in 2 weeks," Director Han replied. "The main battle group will arrive at Earth in 6 weeks." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity had spent decades fighting among themselves, but they had never faced anything like this. The Hegemony ships were larger. Their technology was more advanced, and they had the experience of destroying dozens of civilizations. But President Park was thinking about something else. He remembered the words of his grandfather, who had fought in the colonial wars against the Martian rebels. "A cornered animal fights hardest," the old man had said. "Never trap something unless you're prepared for its full fury." "Sir," General Park said quietly, "our military is scattered across 100 worlds. The colonial defense forces are designed to fight pirates and rebels, not alien dreadnoughts. We need time to mobilize." "Then we'll buy time," President Park replied. He activated the emergency communication system that connected him to every human colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet. "This is President Park, speaking to all citizens of United Earth. We have learned that the aliens who destroyed the Zephyrian worlds are coming for us. They see our act of mercy as a sign of weakness." His voice grew harder. "They are wrong." On New Busan, the Zephyrian refugees gathered around their communication devices, listening to the human president's words. Ambassador Valthora felt her heart sink. Her people had brought death to the only species willing to help them. "The hegemony has made one critical mistake," President Park continued. "They think humanity is weak because we chose compassion over conquest. They think we are easy targets because we help the helpless. They are about to learn why the Galactic Council feared us." In military bases across human space, officers began receiving mobilization orders. Weapons that had been stored for decades were brought out of warehouses. Ships that had been exploring distant stars were recalled for war duty. Admiral Tsujin Yoon received her orders aboard the CNV Ensign's Pride, humanity's newest battleship. She had spent 30 years fighting colonial rebels and space pirates. Now she would face something far deadlier. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "all fleet commanders are requesting permission to engage the enemy." Admiral Yoon smiled grimly. The hegemony was about to wake a sleeping giant, and humanity was very, very angry. The warning came too late for New Jeju. The agricultural colony had been humanity's breadbasket for the Outer Rim, its vast fields feeding dozens of worlds. Now those same fields were covered with bodies. 2 million souls lay dead under the alien sky, their faces twisted in agony as they had choked on air that had become poison. Captain Dong-wook, Lim stood in the ruins of New Jeju's main city, his environmental suit protecting him from the toxic atmosphere. Around him, his Marines moved through the silent streets like ghosts, their weapons ready, but useless against an enemy that killed with invisible death. "Sir," Sergeant Min Young-keo's voice crackled through the radio, "we found more survivors in the underground shelters. About 300 humans and 50 Zephyrians." Lim nodded grimly. The hegemony bioweapon had been deployed from orbit 12 hours ago. Most people had died within minutes, but those who reached the emergency shelters had survived long enough to see the horror outside. Children cried in their parents' arms, not understanding why they couldn't go home. In Earth's capital, President Minho Park watched the reports from New Jeju with burning eyes. The images showed streets filled with the dead, families who had been eating breakfast when the invisible death fell from the sky. Among them were Zephyrian refugees, who had thought they were finally safe. "How many other colonies have been hit?" he asked. Defense Secretary Taeyoung Kim checked his tablet. 3 so far: New Jeju, Harmony Station, and the mining world of Hope's End. Total casualties estimated at 5 million. Dr. Haijin Lee entered the command center, her face pale with exhaustion. She had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to develop countermeasures against the bioweapon. "Mr. President, I have news. The weapon has a weakness." Everyone in the room turned to look at her. "The bioweapon needs specific atmospheric conditions to work properly. If we can change the air composition quickly enough, we can stop it from spreading." "What do you need?" Park asked. "Time, in every atmospheric processor we have," Lee replied. "But sir, there's something else. The Zephyrian survivors are helping us. They know how this weapon works because they've been fighting it for months. Ambassador Velthera had barely slept since the attacks began. She worked alongside Dr. Lee in the research facility, her knowledge of hegemony weapons proving invaluable. Her people had lost 12 worlds to these monsters, but now they had a chance to strike back. The bioweapon is not perfect, she explained to the human scientists. It takes time to convert all the oxygen in an atmosphere. If you can flood an area with pure oxygen quickly enough, you can buy time for people to escape. Admiral Su Jin-yoon received the research data aboard her flagship as the human fleet prepared for battle. The hegemony had expected their bioweapon to cripple humanity before the real fighting began. Instead, it had awakened something they were not prepared for. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Jae-hoon Choi reported, "we're receiving mobilization confirmations from every human faction. The Colonial Federation, the Martian Republic, even the Outer Rim Pirates are joining the fight. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was truly united. Old enemies put aside their grudges. Ancient rivals shared their weapons and ships. The species that had been too violent for the Galactic Council was showing the galaxy what happened when they stopped fighting each other and focused on a common enemy." Captain Lim's Marines were the first to encounter hegemony ground forces on the moon of Titan 7. The alien soldiers wore sealed armor and carried weapons that shot streams of the deadly biogas. They expected easy victory against the primitive humans. Instead, they found Marines who had trained for combat in the harshest environments imaginable. Humans who could fight in vacuum, underwater, in crushing gravity, or burning radiation. The environmental suits that protected them from the bioweapon also made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. "Contact front," Sergeant Ko shouted as the first hegemony troops appeared. The aliens were tall and thin, with 4 arms and silver skin that gleamed under the artificial lights. They moved with arrogant confidence, believing their superior technology made them unbeatable. The human Marines showed them otherwise. Where the hegemony expected panic, they found disciplined fire teams. Where they expected retreat, they found soldiers who advanced through poison gas like it was morning. Mist. Captain Lim's battalion overran the alien positions in less than an hour, capturing weapons and prisoners for the first time in the war. But the real surprise came when the Marines opened the captured hegemony equipment. Inside their weapons and armor, they found something that made every human soldier smile grimly. The alien technology was advanced but fragile, designed for fighting primitive enemies who would collapse at the first sign of superior force. "They've never fought anyone who fights back," Captain Lim reported to Admiral Yu. "Their weapons are powerful, but break easily. Their armor is strong, but heavy. They expect their enemies to run away." Admiral Yoon studied the tactical reports from across human space. Everywhere the hegemony had landed, they were being pushed back by human forces that refused to break, refused to run, and refused to die quietly. "Send a message to all ships," she ordered. "The sleeping giant is awake. Time to show these monsters what happens when you threaten innocent lives." The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had been feared. The Battle of Kepler Nebula began at 0600 hours, when 15 massive hegemony dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, like dark mountains against the starfield. Each ship was over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Their hulls were black metal that seemed to absorb light itself, and their formations moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Admiral Su Jin-yoon watched them approach from the bridge of her flagship, the CNV Pride. Around her, 3 human battle groups waited in the swirling gases of the nebula. Her ships were smaller, older, and built for different kinds of war, but they carried something the hegemony had never faced before. "Ma'am," Captain Min Seok Yang reported from the tactical station, "enemy fleet is maintaining standard attack formation. They're not even bothering to scan for ambush positions." Admiral Yoon smiled coldly. The hegemony had destroyed dozens of civilizations using the same tactics. Deploy the bioweapon, wait for the population to die, then move in with overwhelming force to claim the empty worlds. They had never needed to adapt because no one had ever fought back effectively. They expect us to meet them head-on like every other species they've faced, she said quietly. Show them how wrong they are. All ships, execute Plan Thunderstorm. The human fleet scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Where the hegemony expected a traditional battle line, they found empty space. Their massive weapons fired at targets that were no longer there, their shots disappearing into the nebula's colorful gases. Lieutenant, the Jin, Co. monitored the sensor readings from her position. Admiral, the enemy is breaking formation. They're trying to pursue our ships individually. Perfect, Yoon replied. Let them think they're hunting us. The hegemony had made their first mistake. Their dreadnoughts were powerful but slow, designed to destroy enemy fleets in massive exchanges of firepower. But the nebula's dense gases and magnetic fields interfered with their sensors, making it impossible to track the smaller human ships that darted between the stellar debris like angry wasps. Commander He Wan-jung piloted her destroyer through a field of space rocks, using them as cover, while her crew prepared a surprise for their pursuers. Behind her, a hegemony dreadnought followed like a giant shark, its weapons charging for the killing blow. Sir, her weapons officer called out, we have a firing solution on their reactor core. Jung waited until the alien ship was committed to its attack run. At the last second, she ordered full power to engines and dove toward a nearby asteroid. The hegemony dreadnought, unable to change course quickly enough, slammed into the space rock at full speed. The explosion lit up the nebula like a newborn star. But the real genius of Admiral Yoon's plan revealed itself when Captain Dong-wook Lim's Marines began boarding the remaining enemy ships. The hegemony had never faced boarding actions before. Their ships were designed to fight at long range, not to repel enemies who came aboard. Lim led the first assault team through the airlocks of a hegemony cruiser. The aliens inside were tall and thin, with 4 arms and silver skin that reflected the emergency lighting. They wore elegant armor, designed more for ceremony than combat, and their weapons were beautiful, but impractical for close-quarters fighting. Contact. Front. Sergeant Min-yoon Ko shouted, as the first hegemony soldiers appeared in the corridor. The aliens moved with graceful confidence, expecting their superior technology to overwhelm the primitive humans. Instead, they found Marines who had trained for this exact situation. Where the hegemony expected panic, they found disciplined soldiers who advanced through their defensive fire like it was rain. The alien weapons were powerful, but slow to recharge, designed for fighting enemies who would retreat after the first volley. The humans kept coming. Their weapons overheat after 3 shots, Ko reported over the radio, and their armor has weak points at the joints. Within an hour, Captain Lim's Marines had captured the entire ship. More importantly, they had captured the ship's supply of bioweapon canisters. Dr. Hyjin Lee's modifications to the alien poison were about to be tested in combat. The hegemony commander aboard the flagship watched in growing horror, as his fleet was torn apart by tactics he had never seen before. 3 of his dreadnoughts had been destroyed by gravitational weapons that used the nebula's own physics against them. 5 more had been boarded and captured by human soldiers who fought like demons. Sir, his communications officer reported, with fear in his voice, the humans are using our own bioweapon against us. They've modified it to target our genetic structure. The commander felt terror for the first time in his long life. Across the galaxy, his species had been the hunters, the superior beings who decided which races lived and which died. Now the tables had turned, and the prey had become predators. Admiral Yoon watched the last hegemony ship explode on her tactical display. The battle that was supposed to demonstrate alien superiority had instead shown the galaxy something new. Humanity didn't just defend themselves, they adapted, they learned, and they struck back with terrible efficiency. "Send a message to Earth," she ordered. "The Kepler Nebula is secure. Enemy fleet destroyed with minimal human casualties." But she knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony had other fleets, other worlds, other weapons. The storm of human wrath had been unleashed, and it would not stop until justice was served. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, Ambassador Valthara stood in the restored gardens of her homeworld, breathing air that no longer carried the taste of death. The purple flowers of her ancestors bloomed again under the orange sun, their sweet fragrance mixing with the clean oxygen that human terraforming machines had created from poison. Children played among the flower beds, their laughter echoing across valleys that had been silent graveyards just half a year ago. Zephyrian youngsters with violet skin ran alongside human children, with brown and pale faces, all of them speaking the mixed language that had developed in the refugee camps. President Minho Park walked beside her on the garden path, wearing the new insignia of the Galactic Defense Coalition on his uniform. The symbol showed Earth surrounded by stars, representing the 47 species that had formerly requested humanity's protection after witnessing what happened to the hegemony. "Your people are safe now," Park said simply, watching the children play. "As are yours," Valthara replied, though the cost was terrible. She was thinking of the hegemony homeworlds, where the modified bioweapon had done its work with surgical precision. Dr. Hyjin Lee had engineered the poison to target only hegemony genetic markers, turning their own weapon against them. Entire planets that had once been centers of galactic terror now stood empty, their cities silent monuments to the price of genocide. Defense Minister Hyeonsu Beek approached them with a data tablet, his expression serious despite the peaceful "Sir, we have another request for defensive packs. The Rigel Commonwealth is offering to share their quantum technology in exchange for Earth's protection." Park nodded. It had been the same story across the galaxy. Species that had once looked down on humanity as primitive warmongers now competed to join Earth's growing alliance. The Altarian Empire, which had refused to help the Zephyrian refugees, had been the first to beg for human protection when hegemony forces approached their borders. "What about the war crimes trials?" Park asked. "The surviving hegemony leaders are being held on Luna Station," Beek replied. "General Jung-Soo Park reports they're cooperating with the investigation. They seem genuinely shocked that anyone fought back." Valthara smiled sadly at that. The hegemony had spent centuries believing they were the ultimate predators, moving from system to system and eliminating any species they considered inferior. They had never imagined that their victims might have friends willing to fight for them in the distance. Massive human construction ships worked alongside Zephyrian engineers to rebuild the cities. The technology was a mixture of both species, human durability combined with Zephyrian elegance. The new buildings could withstand anything from bioweapons to orbital bombardment, but they also had the flowing lines and purple lighting that made Zephyrians feel at home. Admiral Su Jin-yoon's voice crackled over the communication system. "Mr. President, the patrol fleets are reporting normal status across all sectors. No signs of hegemony activity." That wasn't surprising. After the destruction of their main battle fleets and the loss of their homeworlds, the scattered hegemony survivors had fled to the galaxy's outer rim. Some had surrendered to human forces, begging for the mercy they had never shown their own victims. Others had simply vanished into the dark spaces between stars. Dr. Lee emerged from her mobile laboratory, still wearing the stained coat that had become her trademark during the war. She had spent the last 6 months working with scientists from dozens of species, developing defenses against bioweapons and other tools of genocide. "The atmospheric processors are working perfectly," she reported. "The last traces of the bioweapon will be gone within a week. After that, the Zephyrian colonies will be completely safe." Park watched a group of human and Zephyrian teenagers playing a game that involved kicking a glowing ball through floating hoops. The rules seemed to change every few minutes, as the players invented new ways to challenge each other. It reminded him of humanity's approach to warfare: adapt, improvise, and never give up. Minister Valthara, he said, using her new title. In Earth's government, do you ever regret coming to us for help? She considered the question carefully. My people looked to the stars for salvation, and we found it in humanity's capacity for both mercy and wrath. You offered sanctuary to strangers, but when innocent lives were threatened, you became an unstoppable force. Captain Dongwook Lim's voice joined the conversation from orbit, where his Marines were training Zephyrian volunteers in combat techniques. Sir, the new recruits are adapting well to human tactics. They're particularly good at the close quarters fighting that stopped the hegemony boarding parties. Park smiled. The galaxy had learned an important lesson during the war: advanced technology and superior firepower meant nothing if you lacked the will to use them properly. The hegemony had been so used to easy victories that they had forgotten how to fight a real war against determined enemies. As the orange sun set over the restored world, Park and Valthera walked back toward the spaceport where human and Zephyr ships worked together to patrol the system. Above them, the stars twinkled with the lights of a galaxy that was finally learning to defend itself. The sleeping giant of human military might had awakened, fought its war, and chosen mercy over revenge. But the galaxy would never forget the lesson of Earth's wrath, and the innocent would sleep safely under humanity's watchful eyes.